This is the endorsement interview for Ohio Governor. We want to thank Governor Mike DeWine and Challenger Nan Whaley for joining us today. I'm Elizabeth Sullivan. I direct the editorial board for The Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. I'm joined by, I believe, the full board. I want to thank all of them for taking part today. Just quickly go around and do introductions. Brad?
Good morning, everyone. Brad Harmon here, president publisher, cleveland.com, Plain Dealer, and editorial board member.
Chris?
Welcome.
I'm Chris Quinn, editor of cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. And I just want to check, Nan Whaley, are you planning not to be on camera for this? Because we're counting on having a video.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't know I wasn't. Sorry about that. I'm not as versed with Teams as Zoom, so sorry.
There you are. Excellent. Now we can see you. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that was Chris. Do you want to formally introduce yourself?
Yeah, I did. I'm Chris Quinn, editor of cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
Tom Sidis, editorial board member of the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com.
And as I said, Tom will be leading the discussion today. Ted?
Ted Dyden, member of the editorial board and a weekly columnist in the forum section.
Layla?
Good morning. I'm Layla Atassi. I'm the editor of the public interest and advocacy team at Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and a member of the editorial board.
Eric?
Good morning, everyone. Eric Foster, a member of the editorial board.
Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Garvin, community member of the editorial board. Good morning.
Thanks, Lisa. And Mary Kay?
Hello, I'm Mary Kay Doherty. I'm also a community member on the editorial board. Welcome.
We're also joined by some colleagues from the news side. Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura Johnson, the content director at
Rick?
Hi, Rick Ruan, State House and Politics editor for cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer.
And Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy Pelzer. Good to see you both again. Thank you.
They are participating for the news value of this discussion. They play no role in our endorsement, deliberations, or decision making, but they're here in case you commit news, which we want to thank you for participating. So I'm going to, and our candidates. Governor?
Good morning. Morning, everybody. Morning, Mayor.
And Nan Whaley, the former mayor of Dayton.
Good morning from St. Clairsville, Ohio. Good morning, Governor.
Okay. Interesting. Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to mute myself and turn the floor over to Tom.
Thank you, Betsy, and thank you, Governor, and thank you, Mayor, for being here today. It's much appreciated. I know how busy you both are now, of all times especially. I'm going to start with asking the Governor a question. Governor, we're asking the people to reinvest you with the governorship for 4 more years. Would you care to highlight some of the reasons that you think have earned you an opportunity to serve for 4 more years, given your accomplishments of the last 4?
Tom, thank you very much, and thank you all for having us. Sorry that I could not make the first date. The first date actually turned out to be the day that Honda made its announcement about 2,200 jobs going to Fayette County. But I'm glad we're here. I appreciate you all doing this. Ohio's on the move. This state is moving forward. We have to keep it moving forward. I believe under my leadership, we can continue to do that. We're creating jobs. We have businesses coming into Ohio, and it's not just Intel. Intel is kind of a symbol. It's very, very important. Makes a big difference, but it also sent a signal that Ohio is really a great place to do business. We're doing what we need to, and we're going to continue to expand what we're doing. In regard to job training, our career centers are doing a phenomenal job. I visited, Fran and I visited, and John's visited many of them. It's just great to see young people fired up, love what they do. We're going to continue to put money into those career centers, more equipment, and allow them to expand to meet what the demand is. I said when I was first speech to the state legislature, I said I'm going to ask you to invest in people. And I'm going to ask you to do things where you may not see the immediate results. I'm happy to say that we've been able to achieve that. A great deal of what we've achieved has come through the two budgets that we passed, that the legislature passed. Those passed in a bipartisan way, and those passed by an overwhelming vote. Also, if you look at what we proposed versus what the legislature ultimately passed in those budgets, we got better than 98% of what we proposed, which I think is a very historic high. We have a focus on children, prenatal care, postnatal care. We've doubled that. We've doubled the home visiting programs, which work so very, very well. Dolly Parton Imagination Library, Fran works on. We've gone from 13% of the kids 0 to 5 who are on it up to 50%. We're moving forward. We now have close to 350,000 kids who are getting these books every single month. In regard to our child care, when I took office, only 40% of the child care facilities were rated. Today it's 100%. We're very, very proud of that because quality in child care. We've expanded the number of kids who can be in child care. If you look at what we've done in children's services, we've doubled the money going there. In regard to foster care reform, we put together a working group that came back with 37 recommendations. Each one of those recommendations is in play. Many of them have already been accomplished, and we're working on the rest. So a lot of more things that we need to do, but just mention a couple that have to do with mental health in regard to children. Ohio Rise. Ohio Rise is part of our Medicaid reform. We've already enrolled a number of these children. These are children who sometimes are referred to as multi-discipline, group, and they're kids who have mental health problems, they're kids who have very severe, many times multiple problems. What we've seen in the past is some of these kids had to go out of state to get the care that they needed. We've seen families give up custody of these kids. We are now turning that around, and I've talked to a number of parents whose kids are now being enrolled in Ohio Rise. We think there could be as many as 50,000 children who fall into this category, and we're signing more kids up every single day. One of the first things that we did in our first budget and in our second budget, long before people were really talking about the mental health problems with children, is we asked the legislature, and they did it, to put turns out a total of $1.2 billion into our local schools for them to use for mental health services for their children and for other things having to do with health and wellness. In Cleveland, the city schools have taken significant advantage of that. In addition, in regard to kids, we got our kids back in school. It was clear to me once we got the vaccine that the urban schools were just not going to go back, and we're not in a hurry to go back for multiple reasons. We did something I don't think any other state did. We cut a deal with them, basically. We said, look, we'll vaccinate your teachers. We'll vaccinate everybody in your building, but you got to go back. And we gave them a date of March 1. Virtually every school was back. Cleveland was a little late. A couple others were late. We got them to go back. Again, I think that is something that was very, very significant. In the area of natural resources, we've made an unprecedented investment in our 75 state parks. And by the way, we're about to have a 76 state park near Xenia, Ohio, Old Town, where we focused for the first time on Native Americans. And we're very, very proud of doing that. Our parks are one of the things that makes Ohio great. 75 now state parks. They're all free. They've always been free. But we've invested a $500 million just in the last session in these to deal with the infrastructure. We're very proud of what we've done in regard to H2 Ohio to preserve one of our most precious assets, and that is Lake Erie. We pulled the scientists together again on this one. I brought them into this very house and had them come up with what could we do, what was cost effective, what would make a difference, and we came up with H2 Ohio. We now have 1.5 million acres under contract where the farmers follow the practices. We now have well over 100 wetlands that we have built since I took office, or that we have restored. Again, a great thing for to protect some of the great assets we have, particularly our water. Mental health. I have stated to the legislature and to the people of the state of Ohio that my goal is to fulfill the pledge that was made by John F. Kennedy in 1963. And that was when he signed the Community Mental Health Act. And that was that we would build in this country a system of mental health so that everybody, no matter who they were, no matter what their income, no matter where they live, whether it's in Appalachia, the cities, or the suburbs, will have the ability to get for them or their family members good mental health services. We've started down that pathway. We've invested serious money. We obviously have a ways to go, and we're going to continue to do that. So these are some of the things that I'm very proud of. If you look at what we've done with older Americans, one of the things that I'm very proud of is how we dealt with older Americans. Frankly, during the pandemic, we followed the science again. We followed the science. And what was abundantly clear when we looked at the science was that this was the most vulnerable group. This was the best indicator who is likely to die. And so we prioritized them. We went into nursing homes. We were aggressive. We brought in the Ohio National Guard. We took the Ohio National Guard into some high rises, senior citizen high rises, and did many other things. Something else that I've learned over the years is that the whole, and something we worked on in regard to when I was the Attorney General, adult protection services. We've doubled the funds going into adult protective services. And also, speaking of doubling funds going back to kids, children's services, we doubled the funds for children's services. So many things that we're very proud of. This, and I won't get into the crime, but I'll just say one thing in regard to what we've done to deal with the crime problem. We believe in local government. We believe in the local police. But we also believe that we have to give them the assistance. And so I asked the legislature for $250 million. They gave it to me, and that money is going out to all, or to many law enforcement agencies. We have over 900 in the state, to help them in a number of ways. Tracing guns. We found that local police departments did not many times have the equipment or the manpower to trace guns. Every gun that's used, that's found, and every shell casing should be entered into that system. We're doing a lot better because we've gone out, created a mobile system. We've also given money, and we've also, directly assisted local law enforcement so they can trace these guns. Warrants. We found out that warrants were not many times, most of the time, put in the national DNA database. The national database. And so you could have someone, who was in Youngstown, and they crossed the border into Pennsylvania, and the police over in Pennsylvania would have no idea when they pulled them over that they had an outstanding warrant. We've really turned that around. We now have better than 90% of those warrants are now going into the databases. So, proud of what we're doing. We have a lot more to do. I'd like to go on, but I know that you want to spend most of the time on questions. But this is Ohio's time in history. This is Ohio's time to move forward. Nothing's perfect. We know there are things that we have to do, but we're moving forward. And I think there's a sense of optimism in Ohio that we have not seen for a while. This is truly our time, and we must take advantage of it. Thank you.
Governor, thank you very much for that resume of all the things you've accomplished during your administration so far. But I want to turn to Mayor Whaley and to see what her critique is as a challenger to your administration and to your service as governor, her perspective on how you've done and how she would improve things if she's elected to succeed you.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for this opportunity today. Unfortunately, this will be the only time that Governor DeWine and I are in the same room, and it's Teams room at that. So I'm glad to have this chance.
I would just like to mention there's a lot of interference noise in the background, so please, everybody, mute yourself if you're not speaking. Thank you.
Betsy, I believe it's on Nan Whaley's end. I think that's where the interference is.
That's where it's coming from.
you want me to come off and come back on? I'm sorry, I'm in a hotel room, so.
Do you have two different devices on, maybe?
I do not. I have nothing on but this computer.
We're getting a strange echo.
Mayor, maybe go off and then come back real quick and see if that works.
Okay, I will do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, for noting that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem. It gets resolved when she comes back in. We should all keep talking because I've noticed that if there is some break in the audio, sometimes the recording turns off.
How does it sound now?
Yes.
Yeah, I turned the volume down a bit too. I thought maybe the reverb might be happening on it. So.
Yeah,
it was. Mm-hmm.
Is that better?
It is much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you. I'm sorry. You know, sometimes this technology is a little rough when you're on the road. Really appreciate this opportunity to be with you all today. Tom, thank you for your question. Look, I mean, this is a pretty simple situation. We've seen Governor DeWine and his party be in charge for basically my entire life in Ohio. And what we've seen is from that period to today, we continue to fall further and further behind when we compare ourselves to other states. We've dropped in things like education, economic well-being, and family and community support from latest studies. We lead the country in things like corruption, infant mortality, maternal mortality, opioid overdose, and we're on the bottom 5 of economic growth. And I think that we need to invest from the middle out. It's something that we have not done in this state for a very long time. It's been a top-down mentality that has been a failure for most communities across the state. Now, look, I loved being the mayor of Dayton, as you all know. It was a job where you get to be visionary about where you want your community to go, but at the same time, you had to do the job of filling the potholes and plowing the snow, or people would kick your tail out of office. And frankly, what I've seen is we continue to lack a partner at the State House and in the governor's office. We have local leaders doing their level best, Democrats and Republicans, working hard to move their communities forward. And even when they say they're going to be a partner, they end up not being a partner in Columbus and at the State House. And look, most of the money Governor DeWine talked about, I was proud to support, which was through ARPA funding, money he was against. So I am proud of the work that I did to make sure that we could get local funding, and that work is being seen on the ground across the state of Ohio. We could do more with it, particularly in giving middle class and working families some relief right now, which this state has done absolutely nothing in during this inflation crisis. So for me, it's a question of priorities and where our priorities are. When you are the most corrupt state in the country, the priorities are around what's happening at the State House rather than what's happening in the communities around the state.
Tom, you are muted. Tom, you're muted. Sorry.
Technology is our friend. We all know that now. Governor, I wanted to ask you, it's more likely than not that either during the lame duck session or very early in the new session coming up in January, the General Assembly may act on legislation in response to the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court of the United States. You have had a lifetime commitment to the right to life movement, and that's well known. Are you prepared to sign legislation that would, in effect, totally ban the opportunity for women to obtain abortion in Ohio?
Tom, let's go back for a moment. You're absolutely correct. Throughout my career, I think that everyone would agree. I'm pro-life. I think one of the essential functions of government is to protect the most vulnerable. I think our unborn certainly come into that category. So the protection of human life is a common theme that you will find throughout my career, not just the unborn, but throughout my career, including my term as the governor of the state of Ohio. We're now going through a nationwide debate that, of course, was kicked off when Roe v. Wade, when the United States Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade and returned this matter to the states. I think it's important. I just want to say this because I said it the day the decision came down, but we can't say it enough. There are people of goodwill, good people on both sides of this issue. This issue can divide not just communities, not just Rotary clubs, it can also divide families. And I just think we have to keep reminding it as we start this, as we go through this debate, and as we will start soon after the election for the legislature to look at this. My goal, and I think part of what a job of a governor is on important issues to lay out maybe the big goals, at least as he or she sees those goals. One is I want to protect human life. I'm not going to deviate. That's what I want. I want to protect human life. But we also have to understand, and the legislature, I'm sure, is going to consider the fact that in Ohio, we have the right to referendum. We have the right for the people to go to the ballot. And so I think that as the legislature considers this, they should consider that and aim to achieve something in the passage of a bill that will be sustainable for a number of years. Third, during this time after Roe was overturned, there certainly has been a debate, not just in Ohio, but across the country. And we have heard from medical professionals. We've heard from a number of people. And one of the things I think that the legislature has to look at is to make sure whatever bill is passed, there is clarity to it, and that it does, in fact, inform doctors, others who need to follow it, and does so in a clear way. So those would be my three criteria. I think we have to wait and see what the legislature does. But I lay those out today, and I've laid those out different times, different people before. But I think those, at least for me, one person, those are things that we need to keep in mind. But again, civility and goodwill in the most difficult, contentious issue. We are all Ohioans. We are good people on both sides of this debate. And so let's keep that in mind, because we also have many other things that we need to work together on here in Ohio. This obviously is a very, very important one, important to me. But we also have other things that we need to accomplish for our children, for our families as we go through this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Whaley, what perspective do you have on the legislature acting in the wake of the Dobbs case? What do you think should be done or should not be done by the General Assembly to deal with the Dobbs decision?
Well, clearly I have a very different perspective than Governor DeWine, because my perspective is where the majority of Ohioans are. What we've seen already, first I want to talk about what we've seen already, is 7 hours after Dobbs came out, the 6-week abortion ban went into place. And we've seen what that has had impact on in our communities. A 10-year-old raped in Columbus, who, Governor, if I'm not mistaken, your staff doubted her existence. And when
that's absolutely not true, and
that was reported by this paper. That your folks told them not to report on it because she probably didn't exist.
Mayor, that is an absolute falsehood.
Okay, well, I guess we'll have to let the cleveland.com figure that out, because they reported that. And then when her rapist was found and convicted, you had nothing to say about it. And we see this in Dayton. A woman excited to carry her pregnancy to term has to go across state lines to terminate a pregnancy once she finds out she has cancer to get chemotherapy. And so my question to you, Governor, is do you think it's right, a law that you have already passed and signed, for a 10-year-old who has been raped to carry her rapist child to term? Is that right? Is that what you want?
There is no one, and I'd say this with maybe some humility, there is no one who is focused more during their career on rape victims. I saw this early on in my career as an assistant prosecutor. I saw the horror, terror, what happens when someone is raped. When I became county prosecuting attorney, one of the things I said was I was going to get justice for rape victims because we'd had a string in the county of acquittals in rape cases. And I started along with my partner Bill Skink, and he and I started working on these cases. And we did it by spending a lot of time with the rape victim and gaining her confidence. And in those experiences, I saw the anguish, I saw the horror, what happens when someone is raped. I don't pretend to totally understand it. I wasn't raped. I don't understand that. But I talked to these victims, spent hours with them, and just saw expressed through their eyes and what they told me what they went through. Rape is a crime of violence. And that's how we have to treat it. We were able, as a young county prosecutor, to get convictions in these cases. When I became Attorney General of Ohio, one of the things that shocked me that I found out was that there were many rape kits that were never tested. And so we started getting into that, and we took that on. And I think this board is well familiar with what I did and what Tim McGinty did. And many prosecutors, a lot of people worked on it. But I said, we will not rest until every rape kit in this state is tested. And the vast majority of those that were not tested were in Cleveland, were in Cuyahoga County. So I have a long history of working with rape victims, strong advocate of victims' rights, strong advocate when I was the Attorney General in regard to more resources, more help to victims of crime. So, with all due respect, Mayor, I have a long history of doing this, and the first thing that went through any prosecutor's mind when the story came out is, who's the SOB that did it? And are they going to be locked up? And are they going to be prosecuted?
Governor, you're not the
That's what goes through your mind.
You're the governor, and there are real consequences to the laws that you've signed, including this one. And this is what,
first of all, Mayor,
when you put issues like this before, and you don't think of the consequences of a 10-year-old in our state that's being raped. And I really want to know if you thought like it's okay for a 10-year-old to carry a rapist child to term, because you still haven't answered that.
Mayor, my heart goes out to that family, to that child. I think of that, and as I do in most things in life, I relate what I see to my own family. If this had occurred, someone in my family, someone I loved, and I can't, my heart goes out to them as a father. If that was my child, I'd want to go kill the guy. The bill itself, the law itself, provides for the fact that if mother, in this case a little 10-year-old, is in danger, that abortion can occur. So I would just let me just finish, Marriage. Let me just finish, and then you can talk. Let me just finish.
To call lawyers before they practice, and that
Mayor,
is not happening.
can I finish? Mayor, let me just finish. We learn as we go through and with debates and discussions, my belief would be that 10-year-old would have been able to have an abortion in Ohio because of that. If I was wrong, and we're going to hear more from medical professionals, then these are the things that we will need to work out, that the legislature will work out as it debates this bill. Again, I'll go back to one of the three basic principles I said that should be in effect that I would ask the General Assembly to look at. And one of those basic principles is clarity. And if these things are confusing, then the legislature will not only have the opportunity, but I will urge them, if there's ambiguity, to make this as clear as possible and to clear up all ambiguity.
This isn't a bill, Governor. This is a law you've already signed that had implications in the state.
I think we all know that, Mayor.
Well, you're acting like it isn't. You're acting like it's
No,
not
I'm not.
something you signed, which you did. And it's already seen implications. And let me tell you, I've had countless roundtables across the state with doctors and med students, and none of them with the law you put forward and signed would say that they would do this, because that's why they had to go across state lines. And secondly, what we have on the books even right now is affecting our med students and the ability of young people making decisions on whether they stay in the state. It is having economic impact, and it's going to have impact on the number of doctors we have serving us, which we already have a short number of, and particularly in rural areas, as you know. So
Mayor,
this kind of out of touch law already on the books. Because I know you always like to say, well, wait to see where the legislature's going so you don't have to have a position. This is one you signed.
Okay, all right. If I can interrupt, folks, I
Let me
think
have one last comment on that. Mayor, I've resisted talking about this, but after your last comment, I'm going to. Your position is a radical position. Your position consistently has been, and I've got you, there's questionnaires where you've signed, where you said abortion should be allowed at absolutely any point. That means right up until the time of birth. Very few Ohioans, Mayor, with all due respect, agree with that. That's a radical position. Very few Ohioans agree that if I want to have a boy, and then it turns out it's going to be a girl, that abortion can take place at any time because it's the wrong sex. You're the one that is out of the mainstream of what Ohioans think. Your position is a very radical position.
You're completely wrong, Governor. I've said I support Roe, and I'd codify Roe in the Ohio Constitution with a ballot initiative.
I can show you what you signed.
I never heard a bill that made a 10-year-old go across state lines.
Okay. All right. We've debated abortion. Let's move on to the next issue.
Governor, one of your successes, unquestionably, in your administration has been attracting new industry to the state and parts of the state, like Intel, like Honda, and also the investment up in the Lorraine area. But the question arises to some extent: what can the rest of the state, especially Northeast Ohio, do to help track some of these same things with your stewardship and guidance of your administration? Obviously, this is a great bonanza for Central Ohio, which is a growing part of the state, but the Youngstowns and the Warrens and the Cantons and the Clevelands and the Akrons need these kind of developments as well. Do you have any sense of being able to reorient the state in that direction?
Before you answer, Governor, and Mayor Whaley, could you try turning your volume down a little bit? We're getting a lot of feedback again.
I have it very low. I can barely hear. Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit. Okay. Thank you.
Tom, I was having trouble hearing part of what you're saying, but I think I got the gist of it.
Thank you.
We have a competitive advantage for a number of reasons. We have a great business climate in the state. Businesses like that, they like the predictability. We now have the lowest income taxes we've had since the 1970s. We're also a state that when business looks at Ohio, they say, hey, they got their act together. One of the things they look at, for example, and when we talk to Intel, I was just shocked. They knew about H2 Ohio. They said, we like what you're doing in regard to H2 Ohio. The other thing that I think gives us a competitive advantage is we have Jobs Ohio. I take no credit for the creation of Jobs Ohio. That occurred under Governor Kasich. It occurred under the legislature at the time. When I took office, I said to Jobs Ohio, let's crank it up some more. Let's throw the ball some more. I think we can do that. And I also said to them, look, this is not just about one part of the state. And they knew it wasn't, but I just emphasized again, look, this is every part of the state. We need for you to be a very, very, very aggressive. And if you look at where, some of the big wins have been, we've seen a number of them in Northeast Ohio. One win that I think that, people sort of took for granted, but it was very, very competitive. And for a time it appeared that they might leave. They went through the due diligence process that a major corporation must and should, and that's Sherwin-Williams. I directly got involved in that, and we worked out something, and I'm just very happy to say that now there's construction going on, as you know, in downtown, in regard to the headquarters, and there's construction going on in the county in regard to, their long-term, focus on research and development. That's just one example. If you look at something else that we've been directly involved in, Jobs Ohio's been involved in, is that's the Innovation District in Cleveland. Innovation District is based on a lot of principles, but one is that, look, we must play to our assets, use our assets, multiply them, and pull our people together. And so, as you know, with the Innovation District, we have Metro, we have the Cleveland Clinic, we have UH, all working together. It's a great thing. We have universities, we have Cleveland State, all our universities, many of them working together. So a lot is going on in Northeast Ohio. When the news about Intel came out, and how that came about was they gave us three days when we got involved, 3 days, and they said, you got to give us a site to enter into this. And we were competing against 39 other places. So we sent out to all 8 districts of the state. One came back, and that is the one that ultimately won. In my discussion with leaders in Northeast Ohio, one of the things that they know, is, and you kind of take the cards as you get them, but it's harder to find a bigger site in Northeast Ohio, particularly in the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County, than it is in some other parts of the state. And one of the things that we're working on, and one of the things that we're doing, is taking some of the money from Jobs Ohio, taking some of the other money, and working with local communities in regard to cleanup. We've got a number of sites that are good sites, but frankly, they're not ready. And they're not ready. It takes 2 years, 3 years sometimes, when you've got a brownfield site to get it cleaned up. So one of the things that we really have to do, and community leaders have to identify these sites that are the most likely to go and be able to be sold and and induce a company to come in, is working with us, and they are working with us to find those sites so that we can supply some of the money, maybe some of the money can come locally, but get those sites cleaned up. So cleaning those sites up, Tom, is a very, very tangible thing. I think the other thing that it applies for the entire state, but we cannot emphasize enough, is workers, of all levels, all degrees, all backgrounds. And so, the one thing that we, above all else, are working on in our administration is to make sure every Ohioan has the ability to live up to their God-given potential, live their own dream. That also happens to coincide what's best for the state of Ohio and the rest of the people of the state of Ohio. So, Tom, it always comes down in the end in these negotiations to, do you have the people? Can you supply the people? Sometimes it's PhDs in chemistry. And we have to show them, yes, we do. We're blessed, for example, one of our great assets. We have 75, private schools in the state of Ohio. We have 14 four-year public schools. And so we have great opportunity there. Where we're really moving also, though, is in the area of our career centers. And I talked about that earlier. But our career centers are doing a bang-up job. And we're going to continue to fund them. And we're going to continue to look for places where they need help. One of the things I have found as I've traveled around the state now is that many of them, Tom, unfortunately have waiting lists, and we got to get rid of that. So a focus on the land and a focus on people. I mean, that's what we have to do, and we're doing a lot better in both of those areas than we've ever done before. We just have to keep focused on it.
I have one follow-up for the mayor, then I'm going to open the questions to anyone else on the panel, for the governor or for the mayor. Mayor, the Miami Valley over the years has had some job losses because of keep companies closing and moving their plants, and you've had some gains as well. From your perspective as a community leader in the Miami Valley, do you think the state's efforts have been sufficient or not sufficient enough to help generate new jobs and opportunities for people over in your neck of the woods in Ohio?
Well, Tom, this is one of the big reasons why I decided to run. When I look at local leaders working hard all across the state, they're doing their best to grow their communities, but they don't get a strong partner. It seems the only jobs move into the Columbus metro, and it's really the only metro that's seen real growth. It's the easiest one to grow because it has the most greenfield space, and it has the most opportunity because of that greenfield space. And my plans, frankly, are about how we build all of the state, like our One Good Job pledge that talks about, making sure we know the state of Ohio has said there's going to be 22,000 job openings before Intel was announced, before the bipartisan infrastructure plan of building trade jobs. We need to put $65 million in apprenticeship readiness programs all across the state. So the people building Chillicothe are from Chillicothe. We know these jobs are coming. We need to make sure that Ohioans are the ones building it, and they have to be that they have pride too. That helps with those communities as well, and that keeps wealth in these communities as well. We can build the middle class and build from the middle out rather than the top down. Secondly, I think there's a lot more that the state could do around partnering with small businesses. That helps from Cleveland to Portsmouth. We know small businesses are the backbone, and having real partnerships to grow that. Now, those aren't fancy ribbon cuttings. It's not a fancy thing. It's a thing that directly impacts all of our local communities, and we could have real impact that way. When Intel happened, everyone was happy for Columbus, but every single leader, in every single metro, texted or called me and said, "Where's my Intel?" And that's why we have to have development everywhere. The answer to this state cannot be that if you're a young person and you want to stay in Ohio, that you need to move to Columbus. We have to have investment in all parts of the state.
Tom, let me just, if I could just, very quickly, Sierra Nevada came in. This is a big company. They're right at the airport, building out the airport in Dayton, Ohio, and they are moving forward. They're going to be fixing planes. Major win for the Dayton area of Miami Valley. Second, this whole idea that we don't work with local communities, the mayor knows is wrong. She knows that from her own experience during the pandemic. I don't know how many times I was on the phone with the mayor, and every major big city mayor, but it was virtually every time that we held a press conference, we would be on the phone at 11:30, press conference at 2. So the mayor knows we do that. Third, in regard to Intel, and I said this before, but we sent out to all 8 regions, and the problem with Intel, or the challenge with Intel, is they needed a huge amount of space. And the only place that came back was Central Ohio. No other place gave us a candidate. Now, that's just Intel. They took an inordinate amount of space, a big amount of space, and there's only one that was able to meet that. But there are ways, as I said, talking about brownfields, other things that we're doing, working with other communities. And what Intel did is it got other communities to think, okay, what do we have to do? And we were talking with them. Here's what we need to do. But our focus is on the entire state. We've had victories all over the state of Ohio, and so the mayor's just wrong on this.
Other members of the panel may have some questions for our two guests.
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't have a question for you, Governor.
And actually, I'm going to jump in. Hi, Lisa Garvin. I have a question about renewable energy. It's kind of one of my things that I'd like to touch on. And Intel has said that they are committed to using renewable energy in their plant, but yet Ohio seems to be kind of backwards when it comes to moving away from fossil fuels. I mean, the icebreaker project went through a lot of, barriers and so on and so forth. So starting with you, Governor, can we move to renewable fuels in Ohio?
Yes, we can. We've always had a position since I became governor of all of the above. We are going to continue to move, and it's going to continue to evolve. I mean, one of the great assets that we have that is a lot less carbon producing is natural gas. And, our ability to move to natural gas, we're already doing it at a fairly fast pace. We can continue to do that. Look, nuclear energy, it's never been a partisan issue. In the last campaign for governor, both candidates, myself and Richard Cordray, were for keeping our nuclear power plants. And one of the main reasons you want to keep a nuclear power plant is because it gives you, as far as your mix of what you produce, it gives you a product that really now in Ohio supplies accounts for about 90% of our non-carbon producing energy that's produced in the state of Ohio is nuclear. Look, you're seeing just this last week, there were more sites approved. You drive through Ohio, you're seeing more and more windmills, you're seeing more and more, basically, the solar panels. And so that is moving forward. So we're a state that is saying all of the above. We understand when companies come in, and this is one of the things that they want. We fully get it. And we're going to continue to see this evolve, over time.
But we're still supporting two coal plants, one of which is not in Ohio. Do you plan to get rid of that part of House Bill 6?
Yes. I've stated that we certainly should not be supporting a company outside the state of Ohio. The whole thrust of that bill, the main purpose of the bill, had to do with nuclear. There was a couple other things that were in fact put in the bill, and some of those have now been taken out, but we have more, and I'm fine to seeing those taken out in the future. But we needed what we wanted to do, and what there was a bipartisan consensus, and this bill passed on a bipartisan basis. There's a bipartisan consensus that nuclear is part of the mix, and those plants have a life to them. That life will run out, but during the period of time, there's still a natural life. We've got a lot of people who work over there, and again, until we can see more wind and more solar, nuclear is going to provide 90% of the non-carbon production of energy in the state of Ohio.
And Ms. Whaley, your thoughts on renewable energy, and also too, House Bill 6 removes subsidies for wind and solar.
Right.
Do you think those should come back, and what are your views on the renewable energy?
Well, Lisa, I think the governor's answer is quite amusing. Since he signed again House Bill 6, he could fully repeal House Bill 6. We see what House Bill 6 was, the largest bribery scandal in Ohio history that completely rolled back renewable energy. No, if you have an above all energy approach, you have to invest in renewable like you do everything else, and that is not what his administration has done. Michigan and Pennsylvania are clearly eating our lunch on this, and we know that this is where the future is. We have the best workers in the world in this state, and we should be investing in wind panels and solar and wind turbines and solar panels so we can actually grow where we know energy is going. That is a laughable answer to say you have an above all energy approach when you do no investment in renewable energy, which is the future. And we know why now. We know that, First Energy gave a lot of money to Mike DeWine. gave a lot of money to a lot of folks at the State House in order to get everything they wanted, and we're still footing the bill. Completely laughable that they have any interest in renewable energy.
You know, it's quite interesting. The mayor talks about nuclear energy and talks about this bill. The fact is, stated she supports the Biden bill, which also subsidizes nuclear energy. So where's the consistency there?
Governor, you're missing it. I'm fine with nuclear. I just think you got to invest in renewable too, something you completely rolled back. You can't say you're for renewable energy if you don't invest in it and you sign House Bill 6 as fast as possible.
Well,
which is $1 billion bailout. I mean, please.
Mayor, apparently you have not traveled around the state. We see solar energy going all over the state. We're seeing wind all over the state.
Oh, I travel. I just imagine what we could do if you actually invested in it.
Both of those are expanding, Mayor.
Next question from the panel.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. We're right now in the midst of what I would say a failed redistricting effort this year with maps that have been there's a lot of background interference. Anybody who's not speaking, maybe if you could mute yourself. At any rate,
I'm muted. I wanted to let you know.
Yes, I see.
It's not you. I think it might be the governor at this point.
Okay, very good. Yeah, got it. Okay, good. Sorry about that technology again. But Governor, I wanted to direct this question to you because you served on the Ohio Redistricting Commission. We've been interviewing a number of candidates in this election cycle who have talked about the importance of when the Redistricting Commission was struggling to find consensus, the lack of a leadership role from you that could have potentially led to a bipartisan compromise. And I would like to hear you speak. This is something we did ask you about in the primary, but speak to this problem, because right now we have maps that have been declared unconstitutional by the Ohio Supreme Court guiding congressional and state legislative elections in Ohio for this election. Could you have played a larger role to potentially counter the fact that the two state house figures on the Ohio Redistricting Commission essentially monopolized the process? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We've got to go back again a little bit. As you know, two constitutional amendments were approved, different periods of time. It was done on a bipartisan basis. We have members of the legislature on Democrat and Republican side, on both sides, who actively participated in it. I wasn't there. I didn't participate in that, but I supported and actually voted for, those two constitutional amendments. Early when the negotiations were going on between the Democrat leaders and the Republican leaders who were on the committee, I tried to pull people together. And candidly, they were not very far, at least from my perspective, they were not very far apart. I thought a deal could be worked out. And I went during this negotiations, and then finally, as we approached the night, I went to the Democrat leaders on the committee, and it became apparent to me that they would not move off their position at all. I went to the Republicans after that, and there didn't seem to be any great interest in moving off where they were either. At least that's my recollection. So I thought there was a deal. I thought, hey, these both sides are close. I mean, they're not really that far. I mean, think they are, but they're really not that many districts apart. One leaning, how many districts are leaning Republican, how many leaning Democrat. And so I, frankly, was disappointed. I tried to be the broker, tried to be the person that put that together. It did not work. Now, after that, as you know, we went through a series of votes. We went through a series of maps, and these cases went to the Ohio Supreme Court. 4-3 votes, they knocked those down. What I think, though, for all of us is significant is that in those court decisions, the majority, the 4 members who are in the majority, made it difficult and really impossible in their decisions for us to be able to achieve some of the initial goals. If you go back and look at your editorials, if you go back and look at the ballot language, there's 2 specific goals that were big. There were other ones, but here's 2 big ones. One was compactness, and the other is competitiveness. We reached the point, if you'll recall, when we brought in the 2 experts, where they really told us we have to make, we have to have fewer competitive districts. It was great irony there. I don't blame them. I don't blame the court. The court was coming up with what they thought was the best way to deal with this. I think everybody has good faith in this. But that is the problem that we have today. And again, I don't have to tell any of you the importance of competitiveness, but political scientists, I can't tell you how many articles I've read over the years where people political scientists and practitioners who say, look, our problem is we don't have enough competitive districts for Congress. We don't have enough competitive districts for this legislature or that legislature. And we know what the argument is. The argument is if you don't have competitive districts, that what happens is Republicans, all they fear is a primary against somebody to their right in a primary. All the Democrats fear is a primary with someone to their left. And so what happens? Democrats move left, Republicans move right. Any idea of coming together in the middle, it gets more difficult. And so I just would say that as we try to figure out how we move forward, I think we need to try to get back to the idea that competitiveness is something to be achieved. What we ended up with, and again, I don't know if the court meant this or how, I don't blame the court, I don't blame anybody, but we're now left with a body of law that makes it virtually impossible to put a focus on competitiveness, and at least as practiced and played out when we had our 2 experts come in and who were trying to actually put these districts together, the competitiveness became something that not only couldn't be achieved, but there was they really, what they needed to do, and their understanding of the court said, is we have to have fewer competitive districts. That's not what anybody intended. It's not what any editorial that I've read across the state of Ohio ever intended. That is our problem as we move forward. So, we have to fix this, but that is something that I think we just need to keep in mind, that competitiveness and compactness got thrown out the window in this process. And again, it was a long process, back and forth. Don't blame the court. Don't blame anybody. It's just what happened. I think when you do have, if we look at this in the future, having legislators directly involved in this, there's another way to go. I just don't know what it would be, but there may be.
I appreciate that. Mayor Whaley, former Mayor Whaley, could you share your perspective on redistricting? It's obviously unfinished business. Who's ever governor for the next 4 years will have to oversee or be part of the redistricting commission as it struggles to get constitutional maps.
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. I think what I'm hearing from the governor here is really the issue with the governor's leadership over and over again. We see this. I've clearly seen it on the gun safety issue, but we see it on redistricting too, where it's like, well, there's nothing I can do. Like, I'm just the governor. I'm here. It's just the way it is, and that's unacceptable. And even to say, like, if we look at this again, clearly this isn't working, and so we have to solve it. 73% of Ohioans voted to have fair maps. It's not an if, it's a must. And it's key to like our democracy. And I know the governor knows that this is making our politics too extreme. That is the fight. And to just say, maybe, I don't know, I don't really have the answer, just shows the lack of leadership coming from the seat that is the 5th most powerful governorship in the country. We deserve a lot better than what we're getting from that.
Governor, if you could go on mute when you're not speaking, because the feedback is coming from you now.
Thanks, Mayor. Was that so? I'm going to yield the floor to any of my colleagues that have further questions.
Well, yeah, Mayor Whaley, you raised the gun issue, and so the governor, when he first came into office, put forth a list of common sense gun laws that the legislature wouldn't act on after what happened in your town. He appeared with you, said we had to do something. Governor, you since then have pretty much signed every bill easing the restrictions on guns to the point now where pretty much any adult can carry one anytime they want. How do you reconcile your position with your common sense gun laws with how you have signed the bills? And then, Mayor Whaley, if you could respond to that, I'd like to start with the governor.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. First of all, the two gun laws, there's two that you're talking about. Those are different issues. Those are citizens who have constitutional rights. I think that the bills that I signed are consistent with the Constitution and consistent with the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution. Let me add, during this period of time where your focus, very understandably, is on legislation, yes, we did present a bill to the legislature. It was an omnibus bill. It was a comprehensive bill. But a lot of people make a point, well, none of that passed. What they forget is all the things that we were doing and have been doing, in regard to crime, that I could do as the executive, and that I, in fact, did do, and that have made, I think, a huge, huge difference. I mean, I talked about the warrants a moment ago. We had virtually none of the warrants were being put in the national database. Now virtually every warrant is being put into the national database. That's a big deal. It's a big deal if you're a police officer and you're in Kentucky and you pull someone over from Ohio and you don't know that that person is wanted and has an outstanding warrant. And so that person is scared to death and is liable to God knows do what. And then the police officer has no idea. So this is a big deal. It's also a big deal. And I get back to my experience as a prosecutor, my experience as attorney general. Some of this stuff in law enforcement, it may not be very sexy. It may not be very exciting like the warrants, but it matters. It matters that when you go to a crime scene and you gather up casings, that those get entered into a national database. Because if it doesn't, then you're not going to ever, your odds of catching that guy goes down dramatically. So, these are some of the things that we have done. $250 million for local. And one of the things I really take issue with the mayor about is that we don't work with local. Go talk to your local mayor. Go talk to, someone who's not running for governor about what we do. We work very, very closely. And 900 police departments in the state, instead of taking this money and saying, hey, this is how you have to spend it, we set some broad parameters, and we are putting this money out to them, and they're using it the best way they think in their community. We also set up the Ohio Narcotics Intelligence Center. Again, not something very sexy, but if you're a police officer and you've got a phone or you've got a computer and you can't get it downloaded, and our men and women can do that for you, it's going to solve your crime. It matters a lot. So all of these things are important. I believe that there are, and it's working with the legislature, if you look at our omnibus bill that we put forward, I still believe that we will be able to pass two of those. One of those has to do with repeat violent offenders, and what that portion of the bill would have done, and now a separate bill would do, is simply say that a local judge would have the same authority as a federal judge has today, with about the same array of penalties, to make in his or her discretion a decision about how long to sentence someone who is a violent offender and who is found in possession of a gun. If you talk to local police, particularly those in cities, they will tell you if we had a bigger hammer in that regard, we could get the relatively small number of people in that city who are causing 80% of the violent crime. This bill will make a difference. I think we can get it through this legislature. Red flag is referenced. We don't think, and I will argue passionately, our bill was not a red flag as it's normally known. But it did deal with a situation that comes up quite often, tragically. And so you have someone in your family who has a mental health problem, and maybe they also have an alcohol problem or a drug problem, and you know they're going to kill somebody or get killed, and something's going to happen bad. And too many families I've dealt with throughout my career who I've had to try to console and you know, obviously couldn't do it very well because they'd lost a loved one who they knew shouldn't have had a gun. And there wasn't anything they can do. What our bill would do is have a purely following the Constitution due process, have to go in front of a judge, but after it was found that that person was a danger to themselves or a danger to others of killing themselves or killing someone else, the guns could be removed until that, whatever problem was, went away. It's constitutional. It's something that I think the legislature should take up. So these are two areas. All the other things that we've done, but these are two areas where it does take the legislature granting this and passing the laws, and I've not given up on those, and I'm going to stay on those. And, you know, one thing I've learned in my career in government is that those who are persistent, those who stay at it, are the ones who end up getting things that they want. And so I was disappointed we haven't got it yet. We're going to get both of them.
Mayor Whaley.
Yeah, I mean, my basic answer is, Chris, that when the people of Dayton called on the governor to do something, and he said he was going to do something, it wasn't about getting the database right on the warrant section. It was about real common sense gun safety, things like universal background checks and red flag laws. And those are things he completely walked on. And then he disrespected the people of Dayton by signing stand your ground, permitless concealed carry, and the arming of teachers with very little training. I mean, we're not talking about responsible gun owners here. We're talking about making our communities more safe. And he is not interested in really doing that because he says what's politically convenient at the time. And then when the rubber meets the road, he's afraid of the extremists and radicals in his party. And frankly, I shouldn't probably have taken him at his word because he is the one that has gotten the most money from the gun makers from this past decade from the State House. It's incredibly disappointing. It's a lack of leadership. I would also point out permitless concealed carry wasn't even veto proof. He could have vetoed it, but won't stand up to extremists and radicals. And, you know, this is personal for me. This is something that I saw happen in my community, and I'm not even talking about things that the majority of Ohioans don't agree with. They agree that we should have universal background checks. The majority of NRA members agree with us, but he's too afraid to stand up to the extremists, and it's a big disappointment.
It's sad that the Mayor Whaley does not understand that the things that I just went through directly impact the safety of people in Dayton. They, in fact, impact the people, the safety of across this state. Look, we have crime problems, and one of the ways you deal with crime problems is old-fashioned police work, and that depends on the serving of warrants, the putting of warrants in databases. It depends on all the other things that I talked about.
Governor,
and
that's
while
just
those are not sexy, those are not, let me just finish it. Let me just finish. Those are not, you know, things that get a lot of headlines. You can't go out and wave a flag about it, but these are things that save a lot of lives. Let's not forget that virtually every weekend in the state of Ohio, in our cities and other places, we're seeing innocent children who are killed, innocent children who are shot by someone who's in a gang, someone who is in a drug, someone pulling off a drug deal, all these reasons. Look, we have to get the violent offenders off our streets. We have to target the violent offenders. What we have done goes a long way to do that. We've even gone in and told some of our cities, look, if you want us to come in and be of assistance to you in a weekend, as you do a sweep, as you do a real concentration, we'll bring some of our DRC, our correction people in, our probation, parole people in to pick up some of these people. We'll also bring in the Ohio Highway Patrol to be of assistance. You run it. It's your city, but we'll come in to help. And we've done that in a number of cities, and we will continue to do that anytime that we're requested. We also, when we had cities that were having disturbances that summer, look, I told every mayor, every single mayor, if you have a problem that you cannot handle and you want the Ohio National Guard, we will send them in. But we're not going to send them in unless you, as the mayor, say this is what we need. And they're going to come in and assist. They're not going to be in charge, but they'll give you the backing that you need. And unfortunately, we had to do that on several different cities, several different occasions. But it's an understanding, it seems to me, while understanding what is going on in our communities every single weekend, you've got to get at the violent repeat offenders, and you've got to get them off the street. This does have to do with public safety. And again, it's protecting lives.
We have time for about one more question. Go ahead, please, Eric.
Okay, I got a question, everyone. So I want to talk about the state of education in Ohio. I know we know children are our future and all that stuff, and I think as you both may know, the NAEP just released the nation's report card, which talked about assessments for 4th and 8th graders in reading and math, in particular math, where it was the largest drop they had ever seen since they started testing over 30 years ago. And so I know we shut down for the pandemic, and Governor, I know you're going to say you followed the science, but what we see now is the impact of that on education. And so I want to hear from both candidates. Do you have specific plans to address what students are learning and their achievement in Ohio, given the once in a century pandemic that we just came out of? How do we address this generation who was uniquely impacted by that once in a generation pandemic and their education and what that means for the state of Ohio? So I'd like to hear from both of you about plans specifically to address the negative impacts on education and students in Ohio.
And if we could start maybe with Mayor Whaley, and then the governor's muted. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm proud of the work that Dayton Public Schools did, particularly post-pandemic. It was one of the first urban school districts in the state that got kids back into school because we knew just what an effect this was having while being safe during the pandemic. And one of the efforts that Dayton Public Schools did was put 2 teachers into classrooms, particularly for K through 3, so we could speed up the learning loss that we knew was happening. And that's had some dramatic effect. Now, look, I think what we're seeing, post-pandemic too, is not surprising because of the learning loss across the state. And frankly, we have to do more with wraparound services like after school and getting kids ready for kindergarten, something I'm very proud that we did in Dayton, providing high quality preschool for every 3- and 4-year-old. We can do that across the state as well. So that way kids can be ready for kindergarten. It's something I talked about at the Kids Vote Forum, that we need to put around, we could put around 250,000 more children into preschool that is quality. So I think that getting the pipeline from, even early childhood is key in this work. And then we need to make sure that all of our schools have opportunities regardless of what community you live in, and making sure that kids have those opportunities that aren't in school too, like going to the art museum, seeing places outside of their neighborhood or their school. And that is where a lot of education happens as well. Now, I have been honest across the campaign trail. I think the one good thing the state legislature did was their school funding formula. The problem was they only funded it for 2 years. It needs to be fully funded for 6 years. It's one of the first times since DeRolf where we have seen that urban, rural, and suburban school districts all agree that this is a decent funding formula that is fair, but we need to make sure that it's in place for the long term. The challenge school districts have across the state is the nervousness that the state legislature is going to do something to them that's going to affect their ability to educate our kids fully, and that the governor won't stand up to them in order to protect our school districts. That's what I would do to make sure we have direct education, getting the legislature out of the way so teachers can teach, and making sure that we have that opportunity in school districts all across the state of Ohio.
Governor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. First of all, this is a big national problem, and it certainly is an Ohio problem as well. That's why I pushed and got our big city schools back. I basically told them during the pandemic, we will vaccinate your we'll vaccinate your teachers, we'll vaccinate anybody in the building, but you need to sign this document that says you will be back in March 1. Most of our rural schools were already back in. Some of our suburbs were in. But we had many of our big city schools that were not. I believe that many of them certainly would not have been back by March 1. Lord knows when they would have been back without that. That's something that nobody else that I'm aware of did in the country. And we pushed them to do that while at the same time respecting the local control and having regard for that. We have certainly put money into help for the schools, but we're also mindful of something, and that is that the schools are now drawing down money from the federal government, but they will, in regard to tutoring and doing this type of work. This is special money that came in because of the pandemic, but we're aware of that. As I prepare my next budget to send to the legislature, there will be a point in time during the tenure of that budget when there will be no more of that money, where they will hit a wall where they will not get that money. So when I present my next budget to the state legislature, it will include extra money in there for that period of time, beginning in that period of time when the federal dollars are shut off. They're going to hit a cliff. They're going to hit a place where they're going to drop down and will no longer be able to pull that money down. And it's all the things that we know work. Tutoring works. Mentoring works. After school can work. If it's done right, it certainly can work. Time in the summer, making all of these things available to our children, in particular our children who are furthest behind. Look, I think as we look at, what is important, everything's important, but some things are more important than others. And the most important thing is always reading. It is the key. It gets you in the door. It just gets you into everything else. And so, continuing to really, really push reading and focusing on that. I would also say that we are going to continue to ramp up, as we have since the day I took office, early childhood education, early childhood development. All of these things, matter a lot. The most important thing, if you look at a child's development, the most important years are the first 3, 4, 5 years. We know that. And, too many, even before the pandemic, too many teachers have told me, I have kids coming into kindergarten, and tragically, they are just not ready for kindergarten, and they're already behind, and they're already over here. And, that's not fair to the teacher, but mostly it's not fair to the child. And so we have to do everything that we can to get that child up to speed, so that child will be ready to start kindergarten. What we're doing in our career centers, and making learning so that the kids can see the relevancy of the learning in the classroom to what they're doing in learning a profession or learning a job or learning whatever trade or that is vitally important. We are third in the nation in the number of apprenticeships. We are first in the Midwest. And what we are continue to push is for our career centers, for example, to be able to work with our local businessmen and women. And it's just a great thing to see the businessmen and women come in and talking to the students, and where the young person is already working, already knowing where they're going, so they can see a relevancy to what they are learning. And it's something that I think is very, very important, and we're going to continue the focus on that. So it's not one thing, it's all of the above. It's early childhood education, and it's also a realization that the kids who were already behind when we went into the pandemic are the ones that generally get further behind. And so there has to also be a very specific laser focus as we spend money. There has to be an insistence that these kids we are prioritizing because they are the furthest behind.
Thank you, Governor. Betsy?
Well, I had seen that Layla had a question. Layla, did you want to ask something before we close up?
Yes. Yes, I did. I'd like to ask about House Bill 126, limiting the ability of school districts to challenge undervalued properties at county boards of revision. In Cleveland, they predicted it would result in an 80% reduction from what the district on average had recently won in property tax disputes. And many, including this board, have criticized that bill because it favors big commercial and industrial property holders at the expense of homeowners who likely would have to make up schools' tax losses. So, Governor, you signed that bill in April. How do you defend against that criticism?
Yeah, look, this is a bill where obviously reasonable people are on both sides of the issue. What we were seeing was that lawyers were taking this over, and we're not providing. We're doing it to bring in additional money. I think if you look at the compromises that were made in that bill compared to how that original bill was introduced, I think you'll see that there are compromises in there that are rational compromises.
I would just make the point, this is what the governor says every time. Like, aren't you lucky it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be? Like, this has been a challenge that's been an issue for school districts. School districts are always struggling for funding, and it puts again, not surprising, this state house and this legislature is completely doing whatever big money and big corporations want, and it even is at the effects of our school districts. Not a surprising outcome considering what we've seen over and over and over again from the state house.
Okay.
Any other questions for our guests before we close? We kept them for close to the allotted time, and I appreciate that very much. They're being so generous with their time today. Anybody else?
We should go to the close because we're running low.
That's exactly right. Thank you. I'd like to ask each of the candidates to make a closing statement, a brief, concise closing statement about why the voters should either return them to the governorship or send them to the governorship as a newly inaugurated person. So I'll start with the governor and then ask Mayor Whaley to comment on that, and then we'll end our session today.
Tom, thank you very much. To all the editorial board, thank you for having us. I think it's been a good discussion. This is about leadership. Mayor's talked about leadership. I've led. I led during the pandemic. We focused on protecting lives. We made tough decisions. But we also did it in a way to protect livelihoods. We became, for some other states, an example of how you come up with the best practices to open businesses. We led during that period of time, and it was a very, very tough period of time. But what I think people didn't see is that we continued during that period of time to work on so many other things. We've been aggressive in bringing jobs to the state of Ohio. There's some calls, there are some meetings that only governor can make. And I've learned through my own experience that while you don't win them all, there's some that the governor has to be involved in, should be involved in, and I've been involved in. I was directly involved with Intel. it matters. Companies look to come to a state, and they're going, in the case of Intel, for example, they're going to initially put in $20 billion in the ground. We're going to be living with them for a long time. They're going to be living with us for a long time. They want to trust the person at the top. So we've led in bringing jobs back to the state of Ohio. We are moving forward, and we are leading in regard to mental health. The first thing I did in my first budget was provide an unprecedented $600 million to local schools for them to use in regard to mental health. That had not been done before. We've led in regard to making sure that the quality of life is good and that every Ohioan has the ability to go to a state park that's near them. We saw the use of the state parks go up dramatically during the pandemic. Yet, frankly, our state parks have been neglected and infrastructure not taken care of. And we were bold. We went to the legislature and said we need $500 million, and the legislature came back and said yes. We've led when we needed a solution to how do we deal with Lake Erie and protect Lake Erie at the same time understanding that part of the great agricultural state of Ohio is in Northwest Ohio. And how do we balance that? And we went to the scientists. We went to the experts, as I have many, many times, and we came up with a plan. And that plan is moving forward and is working. I outlined in my last State of the State speech a bold, visionary plan in regard to mental health. We have started to implement that. We have a ways to go. But Tom, in the next 4 years, if I'm fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to serve as governor of this state, you're going to see things you've not seen before. Where Ohio is going to move to lead in research in regard to mental health. Where Ohio will be committed, and is committed today, each and every day to live up to the promise made by John Kennedy and made by others that when we deinstitutionalize people, which was a good thing, yet the second part was never done, and that was to build a community of support. You're going to see us do that. So these are just some of the areas where we have led. It's easy to talk about, well, this bill didn't get passed or that bill didn't get passed. But my experience has been that money and policy go together. And it's lovely to have policy, but if you don't have money connected with it, it does not matter. And so if you look at what we've done in our budget, where we passed 2 budgets in a bipartisan fashion by an overwhelming majority, and we had better than 98% of what we've asked for, those are victories. That's leadership. These are things that would not have happened but for Mike DeWine and the team that we put together. And finally, let me just talk about my team. Take a look at my team. Look at my pictures of my cabinet. It's Ohio. We represent Ohio. I'm proud of the fact that this is the first cabinet in the history of the state of Ohio that had more women than men in it. I'm proud of the fact that this is a diverse cabinet. I'm proud of the fact that this is a cabinet that understands the urgency, and that we are granted the opportunity to represent the people of Ohio. And it's a precious opportunity, and we cannot squander one day. My commitment to you is if I'm granted another 4 years, we will run through the tape. We will work every single day. We have more to do. This state is moving forward. This is our time in history. We cannot miss that opportunity. We have to strike. We have to move, and we are moving, and we're going to continue to do that. We're going to focus on early childhood education, career tech. We're going to do help with kids who are going to college. We've already required the universities to make a deal that when a kid comes in or an adult comes in, that they're not going to raise their tuition for the 4-year period of time that they're in college. We've increased the scholarships to Ohio kids in regard to what's called OCOG. So we have a ways to go, but we're off to a great start. This is our time in history. Let's not miss our opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. Mayor Whaley.
Look, I think we all want an Ohio we can be proud of, where people and businesses want to move it to. I mean, just like I did from a small town in Indiana. And I think that actually this is the most important election of our lifetimes, because I don't think people realize just how close we are to turning into a state that young people and companies actively avoid. Issues like abortion. If you are a young woman between 20 and 40 years old who wants to start a family, are you going to want to move to Ohio where you can't have all of the choices with you and your doctor? On gun safety, if you're a young person who grew up with active shooter drills, are you going to want to move here with permitless concealed carry and armed teachers laws in place? And if you care about democracy, are you going to want to move here when your elected leaders openly flout the rule of law and draw unconstitutional districts? And think about what this means for all the companies that want to move and expand here. Would you come to Ohio if you're not going to get the top talent because of those issues? And look, I know folks all on the coast love to look down on places like Ohio. They actually expect the awful scenarios I just laid out to happen, and they're more than happy to take our young people and companies that leave. But it honestly does not have to be this way. We seriously have a choice, and I'm ready to prove the naysayers wrong about our state. I'm ready to show that Ohio isn't extreme like Mike DeWine and his extremist folks have pushed, that we are a common sense state. And I'm ready to prove the elites on the coast wrong and show them that Ohio isn't a backwards declining state. Now, look, we don't have to agree on everything, but we do need to refuse extremism and politics of division that Mike DeWine and others in his party have continued to push. And we cannot settle for decline in this state anymore. We can build an Ohio where every family can thrive, no matter what part of the state you can live in, but we have to make a different choice instead of doing the same thing over and over again this November. Thanks for your time and for your interest in this race.
Thank you very much, Governor. You've been very generous with your time, as has Mayor Whaley. Thank you for being generous with your time with us today. It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. I'm going to end the recording and thank our candidates again for their time and ask those who aren't on the editorial board to drop off the call. Again, thank you, Governor DeWine. Thank you, Mayor Whaley.
Thank you.